I'm assuming you are happy and safe with this vaccine. What did you make of Matt Canavan? Is he just desperate for a headline now?
I hope that's not his motivation, but the important point is that Australia has the best regulator in the world. The TGA does its job exceptionally well, and safety is its paramount consideration. We have obviously seen the actions of some European nations, but I think the point that Professor Skerritt from the TGA made this morning, that those countries that have the largest use of AstraZeneca haven't encountered problems and are not taking the action of those European nations. There's no cause and effect that's been established, and all the advice that we have from the TGA, the World Health Organisation, the European Medicines Agency, is that there isn't cause for pause. But if the evidence changed, safety is the paramount consideration.
Of course, and that's the thing. No one's saying that we can never have the discussion, but the more you read about this on a technical side, the more reassuring it is. What was going through your mind when you saw Matt Canavan get up yesterday and say, let's pause the vaccine?
Well, I do think that members of Parliament have an important role. We're not medical advisors, we're not doctors, but we do have an important role in engendering confidence in the vaccination program. So I'd simply say that if any member of Parliament has particular concerns, that the best path is probably to talk to the TGA in the first instance, to establish the facts before asking similar questions in a public arena. That is the proper process that we should all go through.
Peter, your thoughts?
Oh, well, I'm in furious agreement with Trent. I think everything he said is both reasonable and rational. The only thing I would add is that, of course, we're not going to take health advice from Matt Canavan. Last I looked, he wasn't a medical expert. He doesn't have a medical degree. And Trent is right that we as parliamentarians have a very important responsibility as far as disseminating public information. And I think there's a real issue with Matt Canavan coming out there and making this claim without any expertise, flying in the face of all the medical advice we've seen that's coming out of the UK and the assessments that are coming out of other countries about the AstraZeneca vaccine. So I think this is an issue for the government. Craig Kelly's departed, but now it's almost like there has to be some.
So you've got a lot of notes here. Is this what Labor is telling you to do?
No. These
are
articles about Trent I've got here.
Well, that front one is AstraZeneca notes, though, isn't it?
Well, I write out my notes in the morning. What about you? You've got your questions.
I wrote these, though. Did you write those?
I did write those.
You wrote those?
I use my own. I don't use the talking points from the Leader's office. No.
They're usually a bit asinine. From the Labor side. They're very informative.
What about yours? Yours is just as bad.
Theirs get sent out every now and then. The 8,000 doses to PNG.
Yeah.
Is that enough? Is this a time to be more generous, look after ourselves?
I think it's absolutely important that we support our friend and our close neighbour in PNG. There's a potentially a huge crisis there with the widespread community spread of the virus. So absolutely support in a bipartisan way the government to put this package across. It could be more than 8,000. It depends on...
There's the million in Europe, obviously.
Sorry?
There's the million they're pledging to give of our AstraZeneca from Europe, but...
Yeah, that might be too late. What we're talking about up right now, and the government's moved very quickly and good on them, is to get the vaccine out to the health workers, the frontline workers. Now, whether it's 8,000 or 20,000, if we've got it, we should get as much possible to PNG, get the rapid testing kits, get the PPE out there, do the whole package.
I want to ask you about electric cars, Trent. You're talking about if we get to net zero by 2050 and you want Australia to get that target, we'd need roughly 100% of new cars electric by the sort of mid-2030s. Would that end the weekend?
No, it wouldn't end the weekend, and that's the type of concern that sometimes exists in the community about
Why would that exist in the community, do we think?
Because we've seen
scare campaigns at federal elections.
We've seen around the world that there has been hesitation about electric vehicles because of issues like perceptions about range. That's improving all the time. You can get models now that will take you 500 kilometres without recharging. The technology is improving every year. We've obviously seen massive commitment from the automotive industry to move to electric vehicles, and that will spur even more innovation. And the other two factors are really cost and having a strong charging network. And if we are to reach net zero emissions in the transport sector, which account for 19% of our emissions, then really putting the foot on the accelerator, to use an awful pun, to support the uptake of electric vehicles is going to be very important.
You must have bristled when Michaelia Cash was screaming basically about Labor's coming for your ute.
Well, I'm not a ute driver, so I didn't bristle personally, but I'm more interested in what we're doing next and what the future is.
Well, are you encouraged? Because when Angus Taylor put out his plan, it included maths suggesting we were going to pay something like $750 a tonne if we subsidise electric cars.
So there
what do you make of those numbers?
So there are two things about that. Firstly, I do think that there is a case for looking at subsidies in the early stages as the market develops, and we won't need subsidies forever because the cost of electric vehicles
What did you make of that number that came out?
Well, I haven't seen the calculations that were used by his
into
department for that. Well, I'm not an actuary, so I didn't personally review.
Actuary?
I didn't personally review the figures that went into that. But
you talked to people in the industry; they weren't enamoured with it. Do you think it's a contestable figure?
I think that it's a figure that has been contested by those in the sector. I'm not equipped to contest it, but what I do say is that if we're to get to net zero, then we have to really spur the industry today.
Okay.
And we need to look at subsidies to provide that gap until the market brings its price down, as it will.
Can we expect a bold Labor policy on this?
Well, we had a very comprehensive policy on electric vehicles last election, which got.
Was it comprehensive?
Which, excuse the pun, the Liberal Party put the brakes on. Well, I'm not going to put the brakes on Trent's ambition.
You're pinching my lines.
I know. I applaud Trent's ambition on this, and obviously the Labor Party is committed to net zero emissions by 2050, and good on you, Trent, for pushing this with the Prime Minister and the Treasurer. I think it's an important policy area that we need to do better on, and we'll have a comprehensive policy on electric vehicles that hopefully the government can be supportive of.
For Labor.
Yeah.
Again, the same one, or?
Well, I'm not the shadow minister responsible for electric vehicles. Love to be, but
you would. Okay.
Maybe Trent and I can go up against each other on electric vehicle
putting
policy.
in your application. Was Labor's comprehensive last time, that policy?
Oh, look, it was a pretty good policy. It was better than the government's.
What were the details of it?
Of our policy, electric vehicles. It was pretty comprehensive. I'm trying to remember now. It was 2 years ago, but there was a strong commitment to electric vehicles and the infrastructure around electric vehicles, because that's one of the problems in the electric vehicle space, is that you don't have that. You know, you've got the infrastructure for gas stations or petrol stations, you don't have that. So we were committing, I think, some funding towards infrastructure, and that was a big part of it. I think there was some subsidies as well. But overall, the idea was to actually get more electric vehicles out on the road and for it to be, to get a bit more in the market. And so
you won't be spooked. You might be spooked on other areas, but not this. You feel like this is a pretty safe area.
In what sense?
Well, some of the climate, coal, talk about that.
Oh.
But you feel electric.
Well, it's an interesting point you make, because action on climate change is more than it's much more complex than just about mining, for example. There's issues like electric vehicles. There's issues around renewable infrastructure to replace existing infrastructure. Right. There's issues around environment policy. So
we'll see once you've wrangled the portfolio and you can roll out the policy here. We look
maybe
forward
Trent and I can drive around.
Let Chris Bowen know that he needs to be nervous.
Maybe an electric vehicle ute we can drive around in.
Well, it's
doesn't like utes.
It's actually one of the problems because for a lot of us, I don't have off-street parking at my home, and this is one of the challenges with charging infrastructure, because the public network is growing all the time, but it's actually...
Because some people can just whack it in the garage these days, and if you don't...
Correct.
And all right. Let me just ask you finally, Nicole Flint, quite an impassioned address. Perhaps the other focus of this, though, within your party is she has said before, and it's been made clear through some of her colleagues, she didn't feel properly supported, in part because she was a Conservative within the party. What do you make of that?
Well, Nicole deserves support, and I think at the time, and I remember well some of the incidents, even in the fury of a federal election campaign, obviously what was happening in South Australia reached national media, which is why I find it curious that Senator Wong says that she didn't know about it in a seat that she was the patron senator for in her own state. But it certainly reached the airwaves in Sydney, and I think that there was general disgust at the way that Nicole was treated. And
is the tide going out for Conservatives in the party? Is that just part of...
No, I think the Liberal Party is strongest when, to use John Howard's favourite expression, it's a broad church. We do cover the spectrum from the centre to the right, Conservatives and Liberals, and we are at our strongest when we cover both of those effectively.
All right.
And there are strong Conservative voices in the party room, don't doubt that.
Never would. Peter... I mean, this was a big focus for Labor at the election. Penny Wong wrote to party members talking about targeting Boothby. Surely this was on her radar, what was happening here.
Well, look, first I say I think the way Nicole was treated was awful, and it should be condemned in every possible way. And her story should be heard. And yeah, sure, absolutely at the time. I mean, at the time there was a lot of activist groups. Trent probably had the same as many other MPs, where they, whether they sort of threatened our electorate officers, and they were a bit extreme in their views. I think Extinction Rebellion and some of these groups did a fair bit of that, and they were threatening and intimidating, particularly to female MPs
Well, what about
and staff.
Is Get Up?
Well, Get Up, as far as I understand, has denied that they were involved in any way in a campaign against Nicole. And sorry, I should say they also said that they condemned it at the time, the actions that were taken, the vandalism of her office and so on, as they should have. So I think, and again, Penny and most of our front bench women were not involved in any of this kind of treatment, nor were they. I think you were trying to allude to the fact that she was doing her political work, which was to try and win Boothby, but that is very different than being involved in any way in such a terrible attack.
And I'm not saying that. It's just whether it would or should have been on her radar.
Well, look, I can't speak for others, but
do you think Get Up has a problem at all or not?
Well, I mean, I think any organisation, if they employ tactics which are threatening and intimidating, you are, to use the whole footy parlance, which I know you understand AFL, you don't, but you play the ball, not the woman or the man.
Sydney Swans the other day, they tried to recruit me.
Yeah, there you go. But you play the ball and not the woman or the man.
All right.
And I think we need to take that playing the woman or the man out of our policy.
Peter, Trent, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.